MLS charged off after his first ever goal in the Premier League, sat down in the Haaland trademark Zen celebration. A teen roar, being a footballing hero for the club that he came through with on the field and winning the memes off it. I don't know which is more important nowadays. This was Zen chutzpah. We back like Luka Doncic after a weekend, weekends, in which Arsenal Football Club won the Humble Cup, avenging that dastardly ball thrown against the back of Gabriel's head and sticking Erling Haaland's advice to stay humble, right back down his throat. Liverpool went to Fortress Bournemouth and emerged victorious. Mo Salah in the performance of the weekend, somehow managing to resist the urge to peel off that shirt and get his boys out after another heroic performance. Spurs win. Tottenham fans, you can watch this one. You can. Honestly, it's not a trap. And a Nottingham Forest generational beatdown. Bare-ass Seagull 7-0 spanking to boot. Everton, are we good at football? All I'll say is David Moyes' tattoo back on the agenda, and I'm elated to break all of this down with a brain in a bottle from The Athletic. Hello to my friend, the Crown Prince of Harrogate. It's Mr. Rory Smith.
How can you say Salah was the performance of the weekend when Beto scored twice? Beto.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go James Garner. That pass is what we're all saying.
Beto.
By the way, officially the best pass that has ever occurred in football. We'll get to Beto. His joy makes me so unbelievably happy for many, many reasons. But Raw, we've got some deep issues to plumb because over here, we're currently tariff mad and are actually charging towards a World Cup shared with Canada and Mexico, which may actually be the World Cup o' tariffs. But if we think we're rocked by the new global economics over here, I just want to say my heart goes out to you all in England, because massive news that I just read this week that Greggs, which you'll have to describe, it's essentially the omnipresent feature of every single English high street. It's a baker, and it's under massive fire. It's raised the price of a sausage roll, their award-winning sausage roll, I should add, which my mum always reminds me of whenever we drive past a Greggs. She nips in and buys one as an excuse because they are award-winning. God bless you, Val. Anyway, there's been a 5 pence, 6 cents price hike of aforementioned sausage roll, and the nation's anger levels, I'm sure outside your street in Harrogate Raw, the pitchforks are out, and I need you to react to this 5 pence price hike. And I don't know how you describe Greggs. Pie, bakery, essentially feels like the national heartbeat.
It's a British institution, Greggs. In the old days of working for the New York Times non-sports bit, I did a story on Greggs and the kind of role it plays in British life, which I think is one of those things that we don't fully understand, but it's kind of an omnipotent, omnipresent brand, which ordinarily is quite bad, and people grow to resent them. Literally everybody loves Greggs. People who,
my mum.
Val loves Greggs.
Award-winning.
You can love Greggs both ironically and non-ironically. You can love it non-ironically and ironically at the same time. They've launched Greggs it's kind of a cheap bakers, basically. That's what it's famous for. Sausage rolls, pies, steak bakes. These are good, hearty, saturated fat-based snacks, basically. But they've also opened sit-in Greggs, which have got like a nice black interior, so it looks a bit fancy. You can go and sit there with your laptop. They do a cheap coffee. It's good coffee. At one point last year, they opened a Michelin-starred restaurant serving broken-down sausage rolls.
What?
I think they've done a champagne line. Greggs are Britishness. That sounds stupid, but I can back my thesis here, Rog, because they are both simultaneously a bit cheap and nasty, and lowest common denominator.
I'm interested.
At the same time, they're quite arch and self-referential, not reverential, slightly ironic. It's a little bit it's a wink and a nudge and a joke. Everybody loves Greggs. So although they are being criticised for putting up the price of sausage rolls by 5p, which is a not insignificant amount of money when you are buying them in the quantities that Britain buys sausage rolls.
It's a volume business. It is a volume business.
They sell millions of sausage rolls, Greggs. That's a lot of money, Rog. There's a lot
to each
of money.
person, by the way. Millions to each person.
Millions to each of us. That's right. Yeah. I've had 407 in January alone. But they will ride it out because Greggs basically, they are us, and we love them for it.
They are us, we are them. The way you describe it, the sitting Gregs, the saturated fats Gregs, the Michelin star Gregs, you make it sound like English air, fire and water. I'd say God bless Gregs. Best Greg since Berhalter, too soon. But always remember, Raw, I think in these moments, Pastor Niemoller's warning, first they came for the sausage rolls, but I didn't speak out. Because I wasn't a sausage roll, right? Isn't that how it goes?
It rings true, and it is a haunting thing. What else would go up in price? The other great British price barometer that Americans will be completely unaware of. And in fact, Rog, you might have forgotten about. Are you aware of the Freddo gauge?
I don't know anything about it. Is it over here like the Waffle House gauge?
So the Freddo is a very small chocolate bar produced by Cadbury's. It is in the shape of a frog, and it is filled with caramel.
Yeah.
And what Americans call caramel. And for a long time, Freddos were 10p. And that was that. If you had 10p, you could buy a Freddo. If you were down to your last 10p,
yeah, don't worry, life may feel bad. You can always buy yourself a Freddo.
You can have a Freddo, 10p. And it's 2 bites, no more, of pleasure. Freddos now cost 25p, and I know actual adults with university degrees who are enraged by this.
So adults with university degrees and very few teeth.
And well, I mean, again, it's sausage rolls and Freddos. That's all we eat. So people criticise British dining. People get very upset. These are real world things, Rog. If the Freddo goes up from 10 to 25p, that is massive inflationary spike pressure. The same with the sausage roll.
Yeah, but just think about it from the perspective, if you were a chocolate frog, you wouldn't be complaining, would you?
You'd feel a bit classier, wouldn't you, about yourself?
You'd feel a little safer, is the honest truth. Won't somebody think of the chocolate frogs? God bless. By the way, all of you listening who are going over to England for a game of football, and so many of you are, mailbag at meninblazers@gmail.com literally overfloweth with images or letters anticipating a trip. Please stop off, add a Greg, send us a photo of you, and maybe I'll even send you 5 pence to make up that shortfall in return. But we have a lot of football to get to, Raw, lots to discuss. We've got a delightful interview coming up this week with Chris Wood of Nottingham Forest. What a hero he is. Can I just say, this interview is something you should listen to no matter if you're a professional footballer or if you're in mid-career. You're still in a cubicle and you aspire to that corner office. Listen to Chris Wood, his mentality for a late career renaissance of wonder. I think there's so much life there. We're also filming this week where I'm very excited about this. Joe Mazzulla, Boston Celtics coach, Pep Guardiola confidant. Genuinely can't wait for that. But first, a toast. Oh, I've been waiting for this moment. I want to raise a third first Michelob Ultra of the day to Marcus Rashford, whose quite protracted, agonising saga, really a shattering footballing divorce at Manchester United, is finally over. The 27-year-old has joined Aston Villa on loan to the end of the season. The deal reportedly includes an option to make that transfer permanent for around $49 million. I just say, seeing him in a Villa shirt over the weekend, well, it's surreal, like seeing Aaron Rodgers in a Jets uniform for the first time. Also incredible that a player has to leave Manchester United to play Champions League football, but it's been an agony to watch Marcus, a kid who burst on the scene as a local lad, crafted at the United Academy from the age of 7, got onto the field for the first time as an 18-year-old in the Champions League, wasted no time in scoring for fun, destroyed Arsenal in his first Premier League game, and scored so joyously from that time onwards, 30-goal seasons, really propelling the team in their hour of need over and over and over. An attacker in his peak, and you always have to stretch back to remember it now. It was a little bit like that, the frenzy of a Mentos mint dropped into a bottle of Coke. His apex really came during the pandemic. He became a national hero, campaigned against the government to advocate for youth in peril. A massive young hero, really reinforced on the field, a talent for England, a man of wonder. So that descent, the lack of form, the clear briefing of the press against multiple Manchester United managers, a woeful losing of his way from a young icon who seemed to understand that he had a platform that transcended football, yet defined himself as a moral authority, to borderline the past couple of seasons a cautionary tale. Raw, he once looked like a player with a childish relish, a love of football, suddenly seemed weighed down, miserable. As I say, to a fresh start under Unai Emery, may it give him renewed opportunity, renewed focus, and may he resummon his natural blessed talent to soar again.
It's a really sad state of affairs with Rashford. There's all sorts of kind of suggestions that his focus has not been what it might be in training. He's clearly not given Ruben Amorim what Ruben Amorim wants from one of his players. As you say, it is bizarre to think that Manchester United are struggling so badly at the moment, and they are kind of ushering probably their most gifted forward out of the door. That seems a remarkable state of affairs. But it is one of those transfers that really makes sense. Villa is the perfect platform for him to kind of rediscover his touch. Sometimes this happens more often than you'd think. One of the perils of being the homegrown superstar is that there comes a point where you kind of need to leave your hometown. There's associations, there's situations that you don't need to be in. And Birmingham, by American standards, is not a very long way from Manchester. It's like an hour and a half down the road. But there are always roadworks, Rog. I want to make that very clear.
Always.
The M6 is a nightmare. But it is maybe far enough away that Rashford will feel as though it is a full, clean break and a chance for him to focus on the things that he should focus on.
God bless. I do believe Unai Emery will be the perfect, please God, manager for that renaissance, because Marcus Rashford's joy when he is soaring is a joy that I think the world needs right now. And to the football, let's start with the big one. Arsenal, 5 big booms. Manchester City, 1. I mean, just an enormous game in context. You know, Arsenal had to win to keep up at least a pretense of a title chase. City, desperate to prove their own free fall, was just in memory repressed. So that is the stakes going into this one. But even bigger, because it was a sequel to Stay Humble A2, Electric Boogaloo, that spike-filled 2-2 earlier in the season, the late John Stones 96-minute goal, which defined this match as the Premier League's most spiky, acrimonious, bitter clash. Really a wheels within wheels heavyweight meet. Overwhelmed by subplots, that ball no doubt still like a phantom limb stinging at the back of Gabriel's head. You could see it as a bigger sporting symbol also if you wanted to be totally meta about where the game is tactically and where the future of the game lies. But you can also see it as a two-men mano-a-mano clash, sorcerer and apprentice, Pep and Mikel Arteta. You know, City have what Arsenal want, the title. Arteta wants it, almost like Captain Ahab, almost like a footballing version of Whiplash. Arteta banging away on his little drums, Pep torturing him like a Catalan J.K. Simmons. Oh, God, what's that line? I'd rather die drunk, broke at 34, have people at a dinner table talk about me than live to be rich and sober at 90 and no one remembers who I was. That is Mikel Arteta right now. So before kick-off, Raw, the hype, it felt justified. This was the Premier League's equivalent of Frankie Goes to Hollywood's Two Tribes Going to War.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of things that make this City-Arsenal rivalry just a little bit different, I think. And one of them is that there seems to be genuine antipathy between the sets of players. Most rivalries, as much as fans kind of would like to believe the opposite, they're not really shared in the boardroom. So John Henry, who owns Liverpool, and Joel Glazer, who's the kind of principal owner at Manchester United, they're actually quite good friends. They don't mind each other. They're not enemies. The players frequently, Man City and Man United players, they know each other socially. Like, they go out for dinner together sometimes. They see each other in the same nightclubs. They're mates. And it doesn't mean the games are any less intense or the games are any less kind of febrile.
And poetry readings, not just nightclubs.
Yeah, nightclubs, poetry readings. They'll occasionally go to the same lecture series. That's what happens. Any cultural event, really. But Arsenal and City, there is genuine hostility, I think, between the clubs over Man City's charges, over they have what we might describe as different interpretations of how much financial control there should be in the Premier League. In the C-suites, the executives aren't, I think, especially close. There have been a couple of occasions where they might have forgotten to shake hands and everyone's got very upset, or at least performed being very upset in public. And the players as well, as you saw at the end of that 2-2. There's no surprise really that City are in Arsenal's heads. That might be a sentence that annoys Arsenal fans, but it's fairly obvious why City would be in Arsenal's heads. They've beaten them to the title the last 2 years. They are the bar. That is what Manchester City have become for the rest of the Premier League. If you want to win the league, you have had to overpower Manchester City. But what's interesting is the extent to which Arsenal seem to have riled Manchester City too. That was my reaction in the aftermath of that 2-2 as well earlier this season, that it wasn't just Haaland throwing the ball at Gabriel or urging Mikel Arteta to stay humble. He asked Miles Lewis-Skelly who he was. He called Gabriel Jesus a clown.
That's a hat-trick, isn't it, what you've just done there?
Ball
at the head.
Ball at the head. Clown. Who are you? Stay humble. That is more effective than Erling Haaland has been in quite a lot of games this season.
And I think his arsehole XG in that one was just 2.3, if I remember rightly.
But you also had Bernardo Silva kind of came out afterwards and said that, kind of implied that Liverpool were real rivals to Manchester City, whereas Arsenal were just pretending.
None of this coming from a position of strength, is what you're saying.
Well, at the time it looked like a position of strength, because at the time it looked like it was City kind of reasserting their dominance. Obviously, in hindsight, it looks like a City who were running on fumes, kind of desperately scrabbling to retain their aura. But even at the time, regardless of what came afterwards, I think it was really obvious that Arsenal kind of annoy City. Manchester City feel that rivalry with Arsenal in a way that maybe we hadn't realised. We knew that this game means something to Arsenal, but I think it means something more and more to City as well.
Oh, I love a feud. I do. And 105 seconds in, football broke out. Dreamland, really. City, still in their slop era. It was Ortega, gave the ball to Stones, who kind of elected to bundle it vaguely towards Akanji. Trossard stole it. Fed Rice, slipped in Kai Havertz. Got to say, Kai wanted no part of shooting this early, this cold, in this game, this big a chance. And so he kind of chucked the ball over to Odegaard. Thank God. The one cool head in Arsenal starting 11 who netted gleefully. It was his first goal or assist ever against Manchester City, and it was just a stunning move that screamed City of the Pep Horribilis, that one win in 13 free-fall period were on the field, rather than the stabilising return to belief of 6 wins in 8. I was screaming at my television, don't score too early, and I was also screaming at the television, City should have started Kusanov raw.
Yeah, it kind of made you realise that there was a little bit of illusion about that Man City recovery. That they did have a run of, vaguely acceptably winnable games. Leicester, West Ham, Salford City, Club Brugge. They were beating teams that City really should beat, and occasionally they were making kind of heavy weather of it, to be honest. Within those first few minutes, because the second minute mistake was followed up by mistakes kind of in the first 15, really, they kind of made it clear that when you put this Manchester City team up against an elite opponent, a lot of those old flaws, they're still there. That they haven't, the root problems have not yet been addressed.
And the goal, we've got to acknowledge, was accompanied by a delicious moment. Gabriel, marking Haaland in that second, ran past him. I don't know what you call it. I think it was a drive-by redemption chuckle? And I watched it and I was like, oh my God, Gabriel clearly has never heard of, well, two things really, scoring too early and he who laughs last.
Yeah, Arsenal do have a bit of a tendency for this, to kind of get their rebuttal in just a little bit too quickly. Obviously, we know how this ends, so it looks like it's not a problem, and it looks like a kind of triumphant moment for Gabriel. It speaks of confidence. But it doesn't require the world to be too different for Gabriel maybe to regret antagonising Erling Haaland. I personally, Rog, would never antagonise Erling Haaland. I feel that would not end well for me. Gabriel's obviously got more self-confidence than I do.
Actually, yeah, I mean, ultimately it is a sterling totem of Gabriel's complete and utter sheer self-confidence. I can remember Arsenal games in which they've laughed at Manchester United players in-game and ended up losing 4-2. So this was you knew in that moment it was one or the other. And it looked like Gabriel knew something because City couldn't settle. Kai had the ball in the back of the net again within 4 minutes, just offside. City looked rattled. They looked unsettled. Bringing in more wide players in this transfer window and defenders when they really cry out for midfield reinforcement. Felt like in the early exchanges, like watching, and I know you all felt this at home, you were probably saying the same to your friends who you were watching with. It felt like just like watching an ageing lion being challenged as alpha by a younger, stronger male hell-bent on taking over the pride. But then City clicked in. Bernardo Silva set the tempo. Started working down the wings. Arsenal hunkered in, tried to deny Haaland space in behind. David Raya had nothing to do really though until 23rd minute. A mammoth Marmouche in swinging corner thundered onto Gvardiol's head, pounded a downward header, and Raya, raw, with the wrists of a Catalan onanist is the only way I can describe it, somehow plumed it away off the post. It was really a warning shot fired.
There's been a lot of criticism for Arsenal in the last couple of years, actually, that they do have a tendency to not go for the kill. Essentially, they like to play with their food a little bit, and I think that's not ideal against teams of really high quality, because if they're weak, you need to punish them, you need to finish them off, and Arsenal aren't great at doing that. And it did look in that moment as though this Manchester City team that are playing completely bereft of confidence, who, we saw against PSG, they tend to concede goals in these huge bucket loads in the space of 10-15 minutes. Arsenal was stepping off, allowing City to kind of establish a bit of a rhythm. Remember that they quite like passing the ball around, that they're quite good footballers. And it was a little sign, look, that these are wounded, but they can still hurt you.
There was another sign of agony, the choose your own adventure, the road not taken, the Arsenal agony that could have been baked into this one, because they did seize their moments to press Arsenal. They did try and challenge Ortega again flailing. Fed Kovacic, who was flattened by the quite excellent Rice, hit him honestly like a cornerback. Ball fell to Kai Havertz, who had all the time in the world, far too much time if we're being honest, in that world. The goal beckoning before him, the win crying Mary. It was hard to watch, Raw. Havertz just lashed the ball wide right of the post. He looked in that moment, but there was a baseball player, Chuck Knobloch, Google him kids. He looked like a baseball player with what they call over here the yips.
I refuse to accept that as anybody's name.
Chuck Knobloch?
No.
We don't have English people called Chuck Knobloch, but over here we don't have sausage roll houses called Greg's Raw, so it works two ways.
That's true. It's a rich tapestry, this world we live in, isn't it? Havertz is such. It's really hard. It's really hard to assess that incident, given that I know what happens later in the game. Havertz does look a little bit like one of those strikers, and there are plenty of them. There's one with a ponytail who plays for Liverpool, who don't really like having lots of time to think about things. I think Havertz is clearly an incredibly gifted footballer. He's a super kind of ultra-modern forward, midfielder, hybrid player. But in front of goal, with plenty of time, he's not your guy, is he? That's the thing with Kai Havertz. His goal return is astonishing anyway. He's got a really, really good goal return. He is Arsenal's leading scorer, I think. He is maybe not Saka and Odegaard levels of reliable, but he is kind of their main attacking threat, certainly more so than, say, Martinelli or Trossard. And yet, present him with basically an open goal. He's one of those players you'd think there is a decent chance you're going to miss this, and there's a decent chance that'll come back to haunt you.
Yeah, it has had quite a more than above average, borderline potent return for them goal-wise, but he is a player who is remembered for his misses, and in that moment he looked like a gent who just wanted the earth to open up and swallow him whole rather than to have to even shoot the ball. And how I ate for him. I do want to say that the pressure, the context of the title race, the hate his pregnant partners received over social media after those misses. And he is, to me, you talk about him as being someone who doesn't want to think. I think about him as like he's a very, very sensitive human being, really empathetic gent, which is hard to be an empathetic footballer. I think that's what makes him such a sympathetic figure to me. But the game moved on helter-skelter. Another good Raya save from a Savinho first-timer kept Arsenal's lead. And their contact with Liverpool. John Champion, with great flourish, kept talking about Liverpool as Arsenal's quarry, which I just loved. City opened that second half with lots of the ball. Arsenal almost content to let them have it. It's what you were talking about. Arsenal tried to slow down the game. Dared City to break them down. Bold gambit cotton, as they say. And it bit them in the behind. 55th minute. Savinho cross. Haaland was in front of Saliba. He leapt up. Snapped his neck. Incredible thing about this goal. Saliba gave him a two-handed shove into the small of his back while he was airborne. And it did not seem to move him a centimetre. It was like watching a very strong man try and push an enormous block of granite. And God, Haaland. By the way, in the moment, look at his celly. It was actually more terrifying because he restrained himself from any shithousery. In the moment, even when I watched this goal knowing the score, Haaland looked like a man who had murder on his mind, almost unfinished business. And it felt in that second, oh my God, pray for Arsenal.
Yeah, he didn't look like he'd taken the joke very well, did he? He looked a little bit like maybe he was thinking, I don't really like that Gabriel. That Gabriel's he's disrespected me a little bit, been a little bit cheeky.
Yeah, I feel like Joe Pesci and Goodfellas levels of taking a joke. Is that what you're saying?
If I was Erling Haaland, I would make that my celebration. That's his brand. He's the ice-cold, steel-cast Norwegian cyborg. Just stop showing emotions. I remember saying to you, actually, I was disappointed with Haaland with the stay humble thing, because you just assume that Haaland kind of speaks with the same kind of rhetorical flourish as Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Terminator films. Like, that's how he should be. It's completely flat, toneless, almost monotonous, because he doesn't really have human emotions. He's trying to learn them from Sarah Connor. I think it's better if Haaland is just kind of doesn't smile, all the dolls he straws don't make him happy. He becomes kind of a metaphor for human life if he does that, despite being a robot, and that makes him more powerful.
God, I genuinely expected him to laugh in Gabriel's face. That's exactly.
But how much better is it that he didn't?
It was terrifying.
Exactly.
It was when you watch this, even knowing the score, I find it something like I watch it, I'm like, should I let my children watch this? I probably shouldn't let my children watch this. It's that humanly scary, which makes it all the more amazing, Raw, what followed. Because I did not think it would happen in that second. I'll be honest, I expected an Arsenal buckle in this moment. Just the existential pressure on them. The knowledge of their layers of past failures which have fallen like snow on snow. The fact City have been there forever agony. I'll be honest, I did not see this coming. I did not see the refocus, the discipline, the finding, by the way, not just of an extra gear. It was like 2 or 3 levels of intensity. It was almost like an Arsenal white-hot heat that followed in reaction, because within a minute, Partey swooped in on a suspect Foden square pass, edge of the box, urged to shoot by the crowd from distance. Who does that anymore? But he pulled his foot back like a Ghanaian Vincent Kompany. Yes, it span off John Stones' ample buttocks, the ball, and just looped into the net. But it was a gobsmacking moment of misdirection by the Premier League writers, who unfurled a storyline of true Arsenal tenacity, spine. By the way, Arsenal luck with the deflection too, none of which we've connected to them post-January in the modern period.
I'd actually offer a slightly different interpretation.
Please.
Obviously, what we know happens means that it was and it is and it will be correctly presented as kind of Arsenal's not quite resurgence, but it's kind of an Arsenal roar of defiance. It is, you have angered us, we will wipe the floor with you, and in doing so, we'll kind of build this momentum that to me, I think, has a significant, tangible impact on the title race. But more than anything, I think what we saw was City collapse. That was the defining thing, that second goal, it's Stones' part in it is unlucky, although I think he said afterwards he maybe could have tried a bit harder to block it properly. But the pass from Foden is exactly. The pass from Foden is so loose. It's so, lazy almost. It's thoughtless is probably a better word. They gave Arsenal, they just got back in the game, and you are right, that was primed for, okay, Arsenal are going to really feel the pressure now. This is potentially going all wrong in exactly the same way as it always goes wrong for Arsenal against Manchester City. And don't forget, if City had won that game, suddenly they're quite close to Arsenal. They're not far off at all. They'd be, I think, 9 points behind them, 6 points behind them. That's not too bad. But because Foden gives the ball away, because Stones doesn't kind of make the block properly, he kind of does that weird thing where he turns away from the ball to try and block it if it goes in one specific place, but not in literally any other. Arsenal get this huge jolt of adrenaline, and City just couldn't live with it. They looked completely overwhelmed in the same way as they did against PSG a couple of weeks ago in the Champions League. They seemed to crumple and fade and disintegrate before our eyes, really, which is something. It's still hard to see City do that, because you're not expecting, you are conditioned to believe that City don't do that. We've never seen Manchester City do that. But now they seem to do it pretty much constantly as soon as they're challenged.
The way you describe it, the rest of the game in a way was like watching a light blue lung collapse before our eyes. 6 minutes later, Declan Rice again. What an instigating force he was in this one. Fed a speeding Miles Lewis Skelly. An 18-year-old kid. What a week he's had. Sent off last week, wrongly. Red card, rightly rescinded. Given a new lease of freedom and life, which he took advantage of, charging past Stones, lashing a shot that went through Ortega's hand. Goalkeeper could have done better, but thank God he didn't, because MLS charged off. That teen Arsenal youth development product after his first ever goal in the Premier League, and just unleashed levels of mischief at teenage kicks proportions, ran to the sideline, sat down in the Haaland trademark Zen celebration. I always wondered, did you plan this? Did you not plan it? Did it just come in the moment? A teen roar. Being a footballing hero for the club that he came through with on the field and winning the memes off it. I don't know which is more important nowadays, but my God, are you surprised at it? Just how much Arsenal here? Because you can look at it two ways. These are a team of professional footballers in the midst of a title race. How much they took the Haaland insult roar and just felt it so personally, because this was Zen chutzpah.
A little bit, and I don't want to, obviously with my affiliations, I don't want to sound like I'm trying to create controversy or drama or whatever it might be when it's not really necessary. I do think Arsenal have a bit of a tendency to kind of over-celebrate prematurely. Do you remember the Odegaard camera thing last year?
Oh, that was lovely. That was lovely.
It was a really nice thing at the time, and the motivations behind it were, unquestionable. But I think most players are quite conscious of how will this look if this story doesn't end the way we want it to. So maybe the fact they're prepared to do it is a sign of their confidence, it's a sign of their self-belief. Maybe it's something we should really kind of encourage in them and in all footballers. Arsenal's kind of pursuit of the Premier League title this year, as it was last year and the year before, seems really kind of emotional to me. And I do believe that teams who resist emotion are the ones that are most likely to win. I think that's one of the things that City have always been really good at, is they don't really let the emotions of it get to them. They just kind of keep churning out the results. They always seem relatively unfazed. Then they don't really get fussed if they fall behind or if they occasionally drop points. Nothing seems to get to them. Whereas with Arsenal, it does feel as though there's a lot. It feels like a wave about to break, and it might be that it breaks and it's all glorious and wonderful, and you ride it and it's exhilarating. But it also might mean you just get really wet. And I think that's the risk with Arsenal. That's not a great metaphor, I apologise.
Oh, but did he win any trophies? No, but he got really wet. By the way, I just want to... The levels of poetry here, though. Haaland had looked at Lewis Skelly in the last game, as you said earlier, and said, "Who are you?" The fact that it was him scoring, I mean, he knows now. GFOP at SC Boston called it Haaland Freude. What we were watching before our eyes. By the way, I'm sure Haaland, who is actually, as is well known, a serious student of Zen teaching, just looked at it in the moment and just thought of his favourite tenet. I think it was Lao Tzu that said, "When you realise nothing is lacking, the whole world belongs to you."
I'm not sure that Erling Haaland would have been thinking about that in the moment, to be honest. He'd probably be thinking, why do these people keep passing the ball to those fellas in the red shirts? That would have been his primary...
He felt he was just thinking about making more beaver dams with his dad in the off-season. But Arsenal's work was not done. Manic City, frenzied City at this point, press forward, so open. Arsenal just kept killing them in transition. Fourth goal, honestly, like footballing Prozac this moment. It really was. Martinelli down the left, fed Havertz from an angle. This gent who's dished when he could have shot, missed with an open goal beckoning. Probably the hardest chance of the lot. And he cut inside Stones, lashed low and true. His knee slide roar towards the Arsenal faithful. He's such a quiet man. Rarely actually unleashes that kind of emotion, even when he scores. What we saw there, the joy, the relief, the belief, I'd like to hope, the everything that's good in life. I mean, by the way, Arsenal fans, all of it, the sacked in the morning from the 84th minute onwards, what a beautiful sound chat for them. But we've got to focus on City. Sloppy, as you've said, creators of their own downfall. Honestly, second half, as exposed as Kanye's wife at the Grammys, Pep seething. His eyes must have been borderline bleeding watching his players just cough up possession. The levels of humiliation down the stretch must have felt infinite there. Emirates seething mockery, just rocking. It's the first time a Guardiola side has conceded 5 goals, lost by a margin as much as 4 goals, Miguel Delaney tweeted. But it was the ease with which Arsenal scored, the Manchester City fecklessness ultimately. Pep called it fragility. What should this team have done to them what they have done to so many in this league, including Arsenal in seasons past? That's what will hurt the most, right? Yeah,
it was really kind of chilling watching it, to be honest, because I think quite a lot of us have felt that maybe City had turned a corner a little bit, that they'd restored a little bit of confidence in winning some of those winnable games that we talked about earlier. They looked like maybe they were, good for maybe not a title charge, but maybe to restore a little bit of dignity over the course of the next 3-4 months. You maybe finish a solid third or whatever, overhauling the giants of Nottingham Forest. But in the end, I tell you, the game it reminded me of, and this may be a slightly kind of niche comparison. Do you remember when Manchester City won 6-1 at Old Trafford in the derby?
Of course. Why always me?
The Balotelli game. Why always me? That game was, I think, 3 or 4-1 with about 5-6 minutes to go. And Alex Ferguson said afterwards that he knew the game was lost at that point. There was no way back. You might, nick one from a corner. You never know in football. Obviously, that's the glory of the sport. But generally, all things being equal, that game was finished. And United, because they were so used to being the assertive team, the team that attacked and attacked and attacked, the team that could bend any game to their will, they kept pouring forward. And Ferguson, I can't remember whether it was in an autobiography or an interview, said that he regretted not just telling them to sit back, that the smart play at that point was to say, look, we've lost this game, let's just not be humiliated. But they kept pouring forward and City kept catching them out on the break. And I think 2 or maybe even 3 of the goals came relatively late on. So what would have been an annoying derby defeat became this kind of legendary humiliation that Man City fans still sing about now. Certainly whenever they face Manchester United. It felt a little bit like that. It was a fragile performance. It was a kind of exposure of all of City's weaknesses. But more than anything else, it felt like City just lacked game sense. Just accept that at 3-1, 4-1 down, you just need to stop the game happening. You need to make sure that you don't give them any chances. And yet, I think for the 4th goal, that Arsenal had a 3 or a 4-on-2 at one point, and they'd had one a few minutes beforehand. It was as though City just couldn't quite think for themselves. They are better than us today. We are going to lose this game. Let's lose it 3-1. Let's not lose it 5-1.
I mean, as you're saying, the Manchester United loss, it was less a loss. It's more the complete and utter stripping of their identity. Yeah. Time will tell whether we look at this game in retrospect as something similar. But City now have a double header against Real Madrid in the Champions League, then Newcastle, Liverpool, Tottenham, Nottingham Forest and Brighton in successive Premier League games. Godspeed. But this night was all about Arsenal and their huge, delirious win. Arteta's been so bloody good against Big Six teams in the Premier League. He's unbeaten in 17 games against them now. But this one felt like more, to borrow a Liverpool phrase. When Yeri wrapped it up late, a lash of wonder culminating, I think, 36 uninterrupted passes involving every single Arsenal outfield player. Pep once told me that was his perfect kind of City goal that he dreamt of, where every player touches a ball before it's put in the back of the net. When Yeri's finished capping the best under-21 night at the club of all time, last kick of the ball, he then hugged Lewis Skelly at the final whistle. A hug that must fill Arsenal fans' hearts with true joy. An 18-year-old goal scorer hugging a 17-year-old goal scorer after the Gunners' biggest win over City since 2003. Saka coming onto the field to hug every Arsenal player was almost the capper as Kendrick Lamar's Humble was played at the full-time whistle. Raw. Yes, Raw, I know you in your own head you're saying, who dat? Thinking that he fronted the man. After a season spent chasing the injuries, fuming at referees, the possibility of conspiracies, let's just say, the whole thing, watching it, that end, it was almost like watching a collective karmic catharsis.
Yeah, I feel like Arsenal needed it in lots of ways. First and foremost, to kind of prove to themselves that they have seen off City for this season. City are not a match for Arsenal as things stand. That might prove to be relevant in the Champions League. I think we can safely say now that Arsenal will finish above Manchester City probably quite comfortably. The teams look worlds apart. But also the thing that struck me was you need statement results in title races. Arsenal have been kind of not tripping up, but they've been stumbling just a little bit recently. Relatively lucky to get away from Wolves with a win. A couple of drop points, a couple of missed opportunities within the last couple of months. It had started to feel as though it was maybe souring a little bit for Arsenal. That result against those opponents has a kind of coagulant effect, I think. It makes everything just come together. And Arsenal, I've been thinking throughout this title race that I can't see Arsenal going on the sort of run that City used to, where you'd win 10, 12, 15 games in a row. I sort of can now. I think that is now. I'm not saying they will, but I think it's possible, because I think a result of that scale, a statement that bold and that loud can have ramifications, not just for your morale as a team and your sense of purpose and sense of self, but for everyone who plays you. They've seen what you can do, and that changes the way that teams approach playing you.
I just want to say, ultimately, I was so bloody happy for Arsenal fans as they all sang Erling Haaland, "Stay humble, you," unrepeatable word. I mean, only time will tell the answer to that. I guess the big question, the impossible question, was whether we watched an Arsenal new reality, a title race statement, or whether that, and I whisper this, whether it's as good as it gets. By the way, as an Everton fan, I would say that's enough for me. I know it's not for Arsenal, but was that just a memory that will be remembered for an entire generation? Where they'll be, do you remember that day when we all beat Pep 5-1? It was humanly magnificent. And from a day of human magnificence to a team, well, two teams who were having a season, different seasons, but of human wonder. And the other big game of the weekend, and it is astonishing to say this because there's no way the Premier League schedulers thought it would be when they planned the entire season. Bournemouth 0, Liverpool 2. A game ultimately to determine the answer to the biggest question in football, and the one that everybody was asking: who is the one true fat, juicy and red? How I yearned for it to be tiny, massive, brave Bournemouth. Entered on the 11-game club record unbeaten run, but league-leading Liverpool unbeaten in the last 18. I mean, Bournemouth, let me just say, I said this on Friday in our previous show, there's no football team I savour watching more this season. Not just the football they play, which is so ambitious, but the iconoclasm, the optimism, the hope that they embody. They'd beaten City, Arsenal, Spurs. So this game was really appointment viewing. Cherries decimated by injury, which they don't keep talking about, but my God, they are absolutely down to the bare bones. They really met the moment, attacked often, down, that left Kirkes, and that got a chaos Semenyo charging at Alexander-Arnold from the off. I love watching them raw. They are audacious. Bill Foley, the owner, came on our show and talked about how he wants a team who, quote, always attack, never retreat, which comes from his days in the Air Force. They took one swing after another at the Reds, who responded in kind. They loved the open football. Andoni and Slot adjusting, counter-adjusting. It was magic to watch. Semenyo danced, twisted, battered one off the post. Liverpool flew forward. Soboslai had a one-on-one chance, which he hit against the Kepa belly. But then Premier League football is a game in which 1,000 decisions are made over the course of 90 minutes and narrow margins. Switch off for one, make a wrong decision, and everything goes belly up and it can haunt you. And it happened. The midfielder Cook was chasing, was it Gakpo? It was a weird one, soft one. Initially looked like Gakpo had clipped himself, but Rod, the way Cook didn't complain in that moment made it seem like he knew he'd made contact. How did you feel about it? Because GFOP at BTM37122 wrote on our Instagram the decision was almost roughing the passer, touchdown Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because it is both simultaneously 100% a penalty and achingly soft. So I think
two things can be true.
Yeah, both those things can be true, and because of the way Gakpo's legs, he kind of kicked his own shin as he fell. I think when you watch the replays, the instinct is to say, well, he's tripped himself up there. But in reality, Cody Gakpo is not like a young foal who is just learning how to use his legs. He knows how to run. The reason he does that is because he has been knocked off balance by Cook's very gentle touch, and I'm certain not deliberate touch. But at the same time, that is a penalty. That's a foul, and it is a penalty. And as you say, probably the best evidence for that is the fact that none of the Bournemouth players complained. Cook himself didn't complain. And I think there is actually footage where it looks I'm not a lip reader, but it looks an awful lot like he's saying, yeah, it was a foul, yeah. And I think there's a bit of a problem at the moment in the way we kind of, and this is related to VAR, in the way that we assess these decisions, because they're presented as controversies. But we seem to include an awful lot of correct decisions in the list of controversies. If it's the correct decision, it's not a controversy. So, yes, that was a very unfortunate way for Bournemouth to concede a penalty. But at the same time, it kind of was a penalty. You can't dress it up as this is some sort of outrage, the lead's fixed, PGMOL are all on Liverpool's payroll. It's just one of those things that happens in football matches that doesn't look like, it's not a kind of huge sweeping tackle that's clattered the player off his feet. But he's run into him, he's misjudged the arc of his run, I guess. Caught his calf, knocked him off balance, and he's fallen over. And that
don't take away our right to fume, Raw. How dare you?
Have a little bit of fume, but maybe
don't take away our right to feel. I mean, football is ultimately not where we saw and come together to commune. It's where we feel a sense of righteous injustice, and it feels so bloody good. But Mo bloody Salah stepped up, missed 2 penalties against Bournemouth, I think, in previous matches. But you knew he was going to make no mistake. This contract negotiation has given him almost an unshakable, steely determination. Plunged the ball to the right. First player to score 20 in Europe's top 5 leagues this season. Hitting the 20-goal mark for the 5th time in his career. Feat only achieved in the Premier League by Alan Shearer, Sergio Aguero, Harry Kane and Thierry Henry. That is some company. Honestly, feels like every bloody goal with Mo is a different record broken. And even better for him, probably, the Vitality Stadium, the tight camera angles, Raw. Almost the perfect advertisement for Salah's hair plug guy.
People are saying that the contract is what's inspired Salah's upturn in his already astonishing form. I wonder if it's the confidence that comes with having a full head of hair.
God, hair is truth, Raw. Hair is truth. And I wouldn't know the answer to that question. But the Bournemouth thing sang 1-0 to the referee for the rest of the game. They had a fine team goal finished off by David Brooks, ruled off rightly for offside. A fine second half Semenyo paper cut in on goal, shut down by Alisson, who was terrific in this. But the longer the game went on, the tireder the Cherries became. They had been decimated by injury. Liverpool threw on reinforcements. Jones, Bradley maintained their intensity. Bournemouth's bench at this point non-existent. Their agony 70 minutes in when Tavernier salsed through, bent a humdinger off the post. Ball fell to the right man, Kluivert. He has 6 goals in his last 4 games. Open goal at his mercy. Oh, and he first timed it wide right like a Dutch Darwin. Just an agony because Bournemouth had their chances here. As I said, Alisson, I think, came up 4 times big. Hit the post twice. Vicious late Tavernier drive blocked. Actually only by Tyler Adams' righteous gemstones. This was a game of inches. Game of millimetres, really. McAllister not getting a second yellow card. You can make the case Bournemouth's game plan in this one actually worked. They were just done, in Iraola's words, by small things. Slim margins.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Bournemouth are really good. Bournemouth are really, really good, and despite all of the injuries, they play this adventurous, kind of maverick, quite free-running style. They're much more direct in terms of how they attack teams than pretty much anybody else in the Premier League. They give their players license, whether it's Daniel Ouattara or Justin Kluivert or whoever else might be playing. Semenyo is another great example of it, but they have Evan Nielsen on the bench, Enes Unal, all these players that they have. They give them license to go and run at opponents, and Iraola said that before. Kind of, if there's nothing on, just go and have a go, see what happens, cause some trouble. And I think that's what makes them so refreshing. And it causes teams all sorts of problems, and that is true of Liverpool. They rode their luck a little bit. The fine margins were on their side. It helps to have a player like Salah who, in those big moments, doesn't. This is going to sound a bit damning, and I don't mean it to. The shot doesn't hit the post. The artful curling shot doesn't clatter back off the crossbar. It goes in. That is I suppose that's the differentiator between a player like Salah, who is an all-time Premier League great, and incredibly talented, incredibly exciting prospects like Semenyo. Liverpool have that little edge of experience and nous and quality that helps. But yeah, this was a really difficult game for Liverpool. It was a fortunate win in the sense that it could easily not have been a win. Certainly wouldn't. I don't think anyone would have objected if that game had been a draw.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Liverpool got over the line, and that is what teams who want to achieve the sorts of things Liverpool are in place to achieve, that's what they do.
I mean, they are relentless, this Liverpool. They killed the game off with another Mo Salah goal. By the way, one you knew was going to be scored the moment Curtis Jones gave up a shot so many would have taken, instead rolled the ball over to King Mo out wide. And the second he took possession, you knew, almost at Johan Wieser levels of certainty, that Mo was going to swoop, create separation, float the ball into the corner of the net. 178th goal past Frank Lampard, a 6 on the Premier League all-time goal scorers list. No stopping that, automatic. Almost like a Seth Curry jumper. 11 in his last 11 games against the Cherries. I don't know what Maraschinos have ever done to him. Just for that level of violence against Fruits, unnecessary. But you did see when the cameras cut to Slot, the relief in that moment. He's not really a very emotional man. But you knew how big a test this game was in that second. It was a true challenge. It was a real fight. They are now a cosmic 6 points clear at the top after this weekend. But what's most amazing about them to me, Raw, on the field anyway, they're drama-free. The games are drama-bloody-free. They seem to win every single game 2-0.
Yeah, Jonathan Wilson wrote in The Guardian over the weekend that is the scoreline of champions. And although I think that's a slight exaggeration, there is a cogent point in there that it kind of indicates that Liverpool are winning games not by a nose. They're winning them comfortably, but not spectacularly. There is no need for them to kind of really dig desperately deep, and Bournemouth away is as tough a game as there is in the Premier League at the moment. To be honest, they were the form team coming in despite all those injuries. Liverpool have this ability at the moment to have enough, regardless of the circumstance, regardless of the opponent. They kind of have enough. It will be tested in the next few weeks by City away. They've got Newcastle at home, I think. At some point, they play Villa away.
You missed the game, bro.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I did. Yeah, hang on.
Everton.
Yeah, no.
Everton.
That was
Bro,
not. That was
they'll
not
be tested. It was.
That was not a deliberate oversight.
Here's those Liverpool's next games: Everton, Man City, Aston Villa, Chelsea. Still have to play Arsenal at home.
Arsenal at home, Spurs at home, Newcastle at home. They've got through, I think, two of the really tricky away games that they had, Brentford and Bournemouth, with wins, which is an encouraging sign. I think Goodison from a Liverpool perspective now is a freebie. Effectively, it's not too. If they draw that game, and you know me, Rog, I'd always take a draw in the Goodison derby.
Bite your arm off. Bite your arm off for a 2-0 loss, to be honest.
That is not 2 points dropped, because they're 6 points clear. So they will literally be adding 1 point onto their tally. So if they come away from Goodison in 10 days' time, 7 points clear, that's a massive bonus. That game's out of the way. It's done no damage.
God, I'd love to be there.
The one thing that I would say about this weekend in terms of the title race is that it was a significant result for Liverpool and an incredibly significant result for Arsenal. But I think for both sets of fans, there'll be an ever so slight bittersweet taste, just because I think this was probably one of the weekends where both Liverpool and Arsenal fans had thought the other one will drop points.
By the way, one more interesting subplot to this game. Liverpool sporting director Richard Hughes, until recently, same job at Bournemouth, hired Andoni Iraola and Arne Slot within the space of 10 months. I think I tweeted when I found out the dude just must have a black belt in LinkedIn. And two managerial transformations, Nottingham Forest 7, Brighton and Hove Albion 0. Godspeed the tricky trees. What a way to revert after being smashed at aforementioned Bournemouth. Hanging a touchdown on Brighton, proving last week's 5-0 cherry-flavoured humiliating stomp was just a blip. Delivered their greatest win in the Premier League era, resummoning the form of the team that had recently been on an 8-game winning streak, amidst volumes of noise and joy and wonder, eviscerated a quite wide open Brighton. Still no doubt singed with doubt by the traumatic memory of Ndai's seagull wing flapping Selly seems to have done him in. Forest, by the way, had 37% of possession, but scored early and often. Torch Lamptey on the right. God bless. Lewis Dunk netted his 7th own goal of his career. Only Everton and City icon Richard Dunn with 10 has self-destructed more. Alanga, hat-trick of assists. Chris Wood, a hat-trick. First for Forest at home in the top flight since the iconic Nigel Clough in 1987. We'll talk more about Chris Wood in a moment. But Raw, this was some statement. At Super Duke wrote to us and said, period to this game. Looked like the Globetrotters were messing with the Generals. We were just one boot tap on the nose away from farce. To go from 5-0 loss to 7-0 wins within a week made this feel, I think, all the more remarkable and proof. A week's a long time in football.
Certainly is in this Premier League, isn't it? That's the thing, that there are so many teams who are, in a sense, relatively evenly matched. Like, I don't think Forest on paper are vastly superior to Brighton. And at Brighton's peak, I'm not sure Forest are that much better than them, to be perfectly honest. The difference is that if there are certain teams that if things aren't going their way, and maybe what happened at Bournemouth last week suggests Forest belong in this group as well. There are certain teams who, if they are not absolutely on it, if they are not at their best, if they have an off day, they are running into sides who are more than capable of punishing them and punishing them hard. So this was Forest at their most ruthless against a Brighton who were just, to be honest, slightly off colour in defence. I thought Brighton going forward looked okay, to be perfectly honest. Fabian Hurtzler can take that as a little bit of solace as he nurses the worst defeat of his managerial career. You were all right going forward, Fabian. But Forest just don't seem to...
Maybe I'll have Sean Dyche thinking, the results aren't so bad if you put some wins into it.
Exactly.
Like, the 7-0 beatdown, it wasn't so bad.
The other thing is that I think a lot of people maybe looked at Forest losing at Bournemouth last week and thought, okay, maybe that's the bubble bursting, that is the result that kind of reminds Forest that they are flying a little bit too close to the sun. They will still have had an incredible season if they finish 5th or 6th, but maybe now's the time that they just start to fade a little bit, and City or Chelsea or Newcastle or whoever, one of the more established teams up there, they start to reassert their right to a place in the top 4. It doesn't look like Forest are going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, they look down at the wire as tightrope walkers and they're like, no, we're not falling, which I just adore, that tenacity, embodied by no one more than Chris Wood. 33 years of age, 17th goal, most ever for him in a season. 2 things are remarkable to me about him. Yes, the interview is going up today on our YouTube. Go and find it. It's really beautiful. He's a very modest, incredibly focused man. Really a footballing economist's dream. He scored those 17 goals on 45 shots only. 17 goals, 45 shots off an XG, expected goals of 10.29. But also his age, to have a career season at this age. It's a bit like footballing Bryan Cranston. Another man who didn't find fame until very, very late in his career, Raw. And those 2 things together make this just a superlative human athletic performance.
And it's proof that there's no such thing as a bad footballer. There's just footballers in the wrong context. That Chris Wood had this career as kind of admired journeyman, first reserve, kind of target man for relegation-threatened teams. That was kind of his role in life. And I'm sure that he was delighted by that, to... The journey that he'd been on already to get to that stage, to not score that many goals for Burnley, was remarkable. To come all the way from New Zealand, to earn his right to play in the Premier League. But to see what can happen when you take a player like that, who's obviously got a huge amount of quality, who has a skill set that's relatively old-fashioned and a little bit kind of out of favour now, put that with a manager who really values that skill set, who knows how to get the best out of it, and you get fireworks, and that is wonderful for, as you say, like anyone who's stuck in a cubicle dreaming of the corner office. There are clear like parallels and metaphors to be drawn there. But also it should be a little bit of a reminder to football in general. If you have the right manager and the right players, spectacular things can happen.
God, I love your analysis that there's no such thing as a bad footballer. It's just bad context. It makes it feel like you can be just a literary critic and be an incredible man manager. If you don't like your football, lads, just change your literary context.
It's true, though. I think
George Saunders for next Everton manager.
I think there's so many players who get written off by one manager or one club, and it becomes kind of accepted that they're just not very good. The players aren't very good. And it's just not true. There are so many examples of players who just need the right person and the right system.
Anthony at Real Betis.
He's maybe the exception that proves the rule. But they just need the right system, the right person, the right club, the right atmosphere, possibly the right lead. That can sometimes be a factor. Certain players are more suited to certain leads than others. It seems unfortunate that there is this tendency within football, not just among fans, to write players off when really they're all incredibly talented, and it should be everybody's job around them to get the best out of them.
You're all amazing, even you, Mikalenko. To Sunday, Manchester United 0, Crystal Palace 2, with the dying embers of Marcus Rashford's Manchester United career casting that toxic shadow over the game. 12th place United going in, attempted to win back-to-back league games for the first bloody time this season, which I think is a totem of pretty well everything. Palace, stealth impressive. Club record, 7 on the road undefeated. And eyebrow-raisingly at the outset, Amorim, fresh off spending his 40th birthday, talking to me for an interview you can find on our YouTube. He chose to go strikerless. Had a harrying Mainu lead the line with Ahmad and Garnacho either side of him. Bruno Fernandes playing deep alongside Ugarte. Initially, it did work. Let history not forget the Mainu buzzed around, bobbled a shot off the post. But one clean sheet in 10 for United before this one. Palace started to frustrate. Then Kamada, Sarr, Mateta, marauding, menacing. And the confidence just bled out of United like that. The noise disappeared from Old Trafford, especially once Eze came on. And Mateta, the one true striker on the field, scored twice, 6 in 5 for him. Second, just glassing the ball, carving United apart. Revealing that ongoing soft centre. Lissandro Martinez agonising injury only made it feel worse as Palace romped. Adam Wharton back for the first time in 3 months. The kiss on the victory as Palace won at Old Trafford, incredibly for the 4th time in their last 6 visits. But the headlines will all be about United. Blunt, floundering United, losing 7th of the season at home. Really a horror show. Raw. United have scored just 28 times. I think just the bottom 3 clubs and bloody Everton have scored less. Ruben Amorim should think about starting that 63-year-old goalkeeping coach, to be honest. 7 losses for the bearded one in his first 13 league games at United, more than in his last 75 at Sporting. When I interviewed Ruben Raw, I did like him. He's charming. He's clearly intelligent. But his message that he kept repeating, tried to jam in there, was, I am the right man for the job. And number 2, I am so happy to be here. I'm in the right place. He said it often. It was like listening to a gent almost trying to convince himself, never mind the fans. A gent in the bargaining stage, grappling almost, trying to cope. Little of it, watching him, feels like it's coming from a place of strength.
Yeah, look, Rog, I can't tell you how happy I am to be here at the bottom end of the Premier League when I could be just kind of waltzing around in the Champions League.
I thought you meant you so happy to be here on this podcast. I thought you were doing Amorim, like patting me on the head.
That might have been funnier, actually. Yeah, I also really like Ruben Amorim. I think he seems like a good manager. He's obviously very smart, incredibly promising. He's only literally only just 40. Got his whole career ahead of him. I'm sure he's going to be a really, really big name.
He'll be fine whatever, right?
Well, yeah, yes and no, because I think it was so fundamentally stupid to take the Manchester United job in the middle of the season when he didn't want to. I don't understand why he allowed himself to be talked into it. If he'd really wanted to cultivate that kind of manager guru image, he should have held out and said to United, look, I want to take this job at the start of a season, so I have a full pre-season, a full transfer window, can make the squad my own. If you want me, you'll wait for me. And the fact that he didn't, I think, may well prove to be a colossal mistake for him. He's in this weird sort of zone where he's constantly conducting these mad experiments on the team. Kobbie Mainoo is not a centre forward. He's not a false 9. He's never played there. He's a central midfielder. He's a 6 or an 8. You have 2 strikers on the bench, Højlund and Xerxes. Okay, they're not perfect, but Højlund certainly has shown enough flashes of promise that maybe you could give him a go. It just seems... My worry is, with Amorim and United, that he will get time, that United will stand by him as they should, but by the time he gets to the start of next season, the faith in him from both the fans and the players will have been eroded so much by the ongoing catastrophe of this season that he will already be doomed to failure. I think that is the likeliest circumstance with Ruben Amorim now.
I could not agree more. The way you describe him, he's on the West Ham to Sunderland trajectory, and Godspeed. Ruben. Palace made some moves of their own. Prized Ben Chilwell to bolster their left side. Godspeed to Ben Chilwell. Great to see him play regular football again. But you know what's incredible to me about Manchester United is that for the past 7 seasons, I think Sky pundits have talked they'll need 2 or 3 more transfer windows to sort out that squad. But here we are. And somehow they still seem to need a goalkeeper, 2 wing backs, a creative midfielder, probably 1 centre-half now after Lissandro Martinez went down, a striker and a 10 to play behind the striker. It really is. It's like an MC Escher painting where the staircase just keeps going round and round and round. And talking about transfer window needs, Brentford 0, Tottenham Hotspur 2. Spurs fans, how you needed this one. So bloody happy for you. The flames of the relegation zone flickering ever so slightly on that old Eeyore Big Ange's rump. Is Tottenham feeling the gruel of just 1 point in the last 7 games? They were 16th, 7 points off the relegation zone. Even Everton were above them. And the old empathetic Australian was really stripped down to his core. Brentford, it should be said, are not the Brentford of your grandfather's imagination, winning 8 of their first 9 games at the old G-Techers. They've lost 3 of the last 4. And so first corner, Sonny, an in-swinger. Gent scored directly from a corner before this season, but it was an own goal. Jeanette heading home. And in that moment, every Spurs fan I knew was filled with terror. Because their team had taken a lead in 3 of the last 4 losses. They've dropped more points from winning positions than any other team, I think 21. Actually rarely ventured out their own half in that second half. Withstood wave after wave of Brentford attacks. But Jed Spence, an 18-year-old out of position, Archie Gray as centre-back, were symbols of real youthful redemptive spirit and fight. Yes, a fight, a scrappy Spurs, but blessed at the Bees, they're really not set up to roll over and crush their opponents. It was just blunt physicality from them. But still incredible relief when late on they finished the game off with an Ange Ball counter-attack goal, oh wonder. 87th minute, Sonny again, delivering a delicious ball into the Kenny Loggins danger zone. 7th assist of the season. And brief Spurs fans, as Sarr slapped it home, the Spurs fans sang, "We are staying up, we are staying up." Rod, this was the first Premier League match since December 15th had ended with a Spurs win. 48 bloody agonising days. How big was this for Ange? Because it really lances so much of the negativity ahead of that Carabao Cup semi-final second leg at Anfield. They hold a 1-0 lead, yes. Wembley does beckon, but bloody hell, it's Liverpool. I will say Ange making good on his vow that I always win in my second season, mate, would be, for me, one of the most beautiful redemption, mate, narratives football's ever seen.
Yeah, I've got to admit, I think that a Spurs-Newcastle Carabao Cup final will be incredible for both clubs, the Carabao Cup as an institution and English football as a whole. I think what that tournament always needs is a final between 2 teams who really care. And if it's Liverpool-Arsenal, which I think is unlikely just because Newcastle have got a 2-goal lead over Arsenal already, then it's 2 teams for whom it's a bit of a warm-up to the main event. It's a kind of an afterthought. It might be a consolation prize. For Spurs and Newcastle, it would be kind of the whole show. And I think that's really important for the tournament. This does feel like a defining week for Postecoglou. They've already signed Kevin Danso, who's an Austrian international, although I think he spent a lot of his sort of football in youth in England. They signed him on loan from Lens. They are about to sign as we're recording, they're about to sign Mathys Tel, the French winner from Bayern Munich, on loan. There are reinforcements arriving. But obviously, it being Tottenham, that light at the tunnel is an oncoming train. So you've also got injuries to Radu Dragisin. I think Christian Romero's had a bit of a setback, so he might not be back as quickly as they'd hoped. Mickey van der Ven the same. They are threadbare. They will continue to be threadbare. And it felt to me as though if they'd lost to Brentford and then gone out of the Carabao Cup, that was the point at which I thought Postecoglou might be really in danger. Oh. As it is, that win buys him time, and if they can get through Anfield and into the Carabao Cup final at Wembley, I think that does offer Postecoglou kind of a redemption arc.
God, come on, Big Ange, you Eeyore, Bing Bong, Book of Job of football, all of that suffering. I wish you only joy. In other games, Ipswich won. Southampton 2. A game so poor that Michael Oliver, the referee who made that mistake against Arsenal last week, I think was punished by making him officiate it. This was meant to be Ipswich's moment. They played more games against top half sides than anyone other than Wolves. I think this is the first of 4 of their next 5 against supposedly beatable opponents. I think it will terrify them to their core. That they failed so lacklusterly. Southampton emerged. Probably no one more shocked than Southampton with just their second win of the season. The Saints are no doubt doomed, but this takes them to within 2 points of Derby's notorious worst ever 2007-8 Premier League campaign, which was the game within the game. Newcastle 1, Fulham 2. The vapours of a top 4 chase for Newcastle, that 9-match winning run of yours suddenly looked like vague embers. Newcastle, I think, either distracted by that Carabao Cup semi-final you've just talked about, or the exit door of the transfer window through which a number of talents are rumoured to be leaving to balance the books. Fulham shattered the team's attempt to assert control and came back into this one. Key, again, the majestic Anthony Robinson, his 10th assist of the season, most ever by an American man in the Premier League, joint most by a Fulham player in a single Premier League season. Raw, is Anthony Robinson the greatest Scouse American that history's ever seen, or is Trent Alexander-Arnold still in with the show?
Are there other Scouse Americans I should be aware of?
Only me, Raw.
Is it you and Anthony? Is that it?
I think somehow there's only 3 of us. But I think I still somehow come 871st in the list.
Is Anthony Robinson a greater historical figure than you? No. But he is having a wonderful season. He is playing brilliantly for a team that are punching way above their weight, that look really well coached, really well managed. And it's just another example of how evenly balanced the Premier League is. You know, Newcastle looked like one of the form teams, and yet Fulham they rode the storm, and they came away with a win. And now, would you say that Fulham or Newcastle are stronger? It's really hard to say.
I actually thought that Anthony would have moved in this transfer window, and I think again it's a sign of this new Premier League where players are staying put and not being prized away immediately, which is making this season so bloody great. Am I a great Scouse American? Definitely not, although I did just make the Wikipedia list of the famous old schoolboys of my school, a school I hated every second of being at. It is remarkable what Anthony's doing, and by the way, the fact it was Raul Jimenez on the end of his cross made it all feel all the more CONCACAF thundery. Wolves 2, Aston Villa 0. Been a long, hard, cold season for Wolves, but they live and love to beat the Villa. In the West Midlands derby, those two dread rivals, 12 miles separated. Wolves kicked off in the relegation mire. Villa, fresh off, making a round of 16 in the Champions League. But Unai Emery's squad have constantly gone a cropper. This has been the motif of their season in the wake of European competition. 4 losses, 3 draws, just 1 win after midweek exertion. And so in this one, I will say against a truly collective spirited Pereira's Wolves. First win for them after 4 straight Premier League defeats, clambering out the relegation zone. Raw, the cinema of that last-minute wonder goal by Cunha, linked to a transfer to both Arsenal and the Villa, which would be unfathomable. 97th minute, half-field run, held up the ball, and then Duke Kona out of his socks, then lashed home, ran to the fans, overwhelmed by emotion. A teammate draped his jersey on his shoulder like a cape on a king. The relegation fight, the transfer window, beating the Villa, all of it just so magnificent. He walked up to the Wolves fans after the game, mimed signing a contract, pounded his chest, kissed the badge, told him he was staying here. The cynic in me watched it and was like, well, that's him gone on Monday then. But no, reportedly signed a new contract, and it was magnificent. Life for Wolves. But Raw, Villa do need that lift almost from Marcus Rashford as much as he needs it from them.
Yeah, they're going for a couple of others, I think, as well, and it may well be that by the time kind of Tuesday arrives, that they've strengthened their squad slightly further. They've suffered this season, Villa, from Champions League syndrome. We saw it with Newcastle last year. It's really hard to play 2 games of that significance every week for so much of the season. They've done really well in Europe. They've made it to the direct to the Champions League last 16, so they do get a kind of fortnight's break from European commitments. But they just look a little bit like they found it hard going competing on 2 fronts. And it may well be that Rashford is the sort of proven finisher, if they can get him back to something like his best, that lifts them again. But I will say, I'm very sad that John Duran has gone.
Yeah, I mean, it's very odd. A gentleman in that locker room who is quite unsettling to so many of the players to fill his space with Marcus Rashford, who's just been that at Manchester United, made that transformation kick in so unbelievably immediately. This afternoon, Graham Potter goes back to Chelsea with revenge on his mind, like Liam Neeson in Taken 1, 2 and 3. A very decent Liam Neeson, though. It pities me to kill you, I imagine Graham Potter say. So that leaves us with, did this happen? Everton 4, Leicester City 0. Bloody hell, Raw. David Moyes has, changed the feng shui at Goodison. Do you think David Moyes knows what feng shui is, or does he think he thinks it's a foo-foo new Asian beer like Sing Chow?
I think David Moyes is probably an ardent believer in feng shui. I think
I'd love to believe that.
That is, he'll have gone in. He's probably rearranged some of the desks. He's made sure that there's more natural light in the room. He's got the flow right.
Yes.
And the obvious thing is
Incense.
that Abdoulaye Traoré now scores after 10 seconds.
By the way, 10.18 seconds we scored. Fastest ever goal for Everton, fourth fastest ever in the Premier League. Pickford belting long to Doucouré, who somehow did not miss. That's the miracle of this. I felt in that moment such extreme emotions like, good God, Moyes ball, but also too early. Much too early. We had something suddenly precious to lose. And then Beto scored on 6 minutes. First Premier League goal for him in 3 months. Miracles. Raw. When he scored, I somehow felt worse because Everton are possibly the only team in the Premier League who can score 2 goals too early, right?
Yeah, well, as a rule, you can't score twice too early. You can only score once too early. And Everton's first goal was obviously too early. You shouldn't even try and score in the first minute. I think
Doucouré probably tried to miss, knowing him.
Try and score for the first 15, to be honest. The second one, I think, was probably less a case of Everton scoring too early and Everton suddenly realising that Leicester might not be very good.
God, I mean, that proved to be the case. Leicester were terrible. Still, huge relief when Beto scored again on the stroke of half-time. Garner, quite ecstatically feeding him to run through like prime Jerome Bettis. Beto opened up his hips, finished sharply. Sincerely, Beto is an incredible story. He was playing in Portugal's regional leagues until 2019, working part-time in a Kentucky Fried Chicken, I crap you not. He blew up in Italy, has never adjusted to the Premier League, was miserable under Deitch, honestly needs the ball played in behind instead of being pumped up for him to do knockdowns, was on the cusp. I mean, was really packed probably to go back to Italy this transfer window. We obviously need strikers with Dominic Calvert-Lewin out. His mini redemption, Raw, that to me is Moyes man management. You see it all over the field, making something out of nothing when we had no choice but to go with him. That Moyes man management is a symbol of everything he's done, because these are days of relief and wonder. Beto scoring, doing LeBron's silence of Selly, the fans bouncing again, as they did of old at Goodison Park. But we needed David Moyes to reconjure. Leicester terrible. Jamie Vardy 9 touches all game. I think 4 were from kickoffs. But this was about David Moyes. The fans sang for him. Delivered his 3rd straight Everton win. We're scoring from open play again. We're defending so well. Jake O'Brien free and joyful. Raw. Our returning dad, granddad really, has got as many victories in 4 games, 14 days, as Sean Dyche delivered in 5 months and 19 matches. It feels so good to feel so bloody good again. 7 more games to go at Goodison Park, which will rock with wonder and memory and a sense of surging optimism. It will never be replaced.
No, and I think when it comes to the last couple of games at Goodison, then I think there will be a lot of sorrow around Everton, and it's probably for the best actually that Everton have kind of lifted themselves free of the relegation mire before that happened, so they can spend those few weeks kind of mourning the place that's always been home, or been home since 1892. The thing that I find staggering is that I don't think Sean Dyche is a bad football manager at all, but the contrast is astonishing in players like, not just Beto, obviously, this weekend, but Doucouré, who's been a shadow of himself all season. Where did this version of Jesper Lindstrom come from? When did that happen? It's literally...
Moyes knows where to tickle him.
I mean, possibly literally. I don't know. It's just the transformation in Everton must partly, as you say, be down to sort of Moyes' leadership, his tactical acumen, his ability to get the best out of players. But it's really hard not to think some of it is that they're quite glad they're not being coached by Sean Dyche anymore.
Yeah, and they're training properly again, which they were not. And they're thinking about how the opponent may play again. They're watching basic tenets of management and leadership. But the Moyes effect is real. By the way, beautiful banner held up before kickoff with the Beatles line from In My Life. There are places I'll remember, which move me more than I can say. I'm trying to work out when I can go and see my last game at Goodison. Just a link to a past of grandeur and triumph. A venue of collective memory as much as it is a place I desperately want to get back and revel in the profound sense of biography. That's what it is for millions of people. They place a biography for all who've revelled in that grand old home. But let's wrap this one up with the beauty of a letter from a GFOP. We love your letters, your questions, your ideas. Write to us at meninblazers@gmail.com. Any letter we read at the end of the show gets a patch. And this week, the honours go to the mighty Jackson Badger.
Yeah, again, I mean, not a name.
We don't have Jackson Badgers in England, do we?
I can 100% guarantee there is no one called Jackson Badger in England.
America.
The letter starts from Jackson Badger, who I presume is not a real badger. Hi, Rog and Rory. The past 3 months have been a bit of a whirlwind, so this email is quite a bit delayed. This past September, my life partner and I officially tied the knot after dating for 9+ years. About time. It was a wonderful day full of merriment and love. It was perfect. Feels a little bit here like Jackson's just showing off, but okay.
9 years on loan, made it permanent.
It's a Chelsea contract. I'm not emailing you to boast about my wedding. I want to relay that a quote from a Jurgen Klopp interview with you, Rog, made it into my wedding vows when he said, "In life you will be judged at the end, and when we stand in front of that door, if somebody would ask you, did you win something or not, that would be a really strange thing to say. I believe they will ask you, did you do everything to improve the place you've been?" I'm not a religious man, but I used that beautiful quote to illustrate to my wonderful wife how she makes every place she goes better than when she arrived. She laughed at me, but loved the quote. Bless her heart, she's watched me fall into football fandom and deal with my many grumpy weekends when Spurs are, well, Spursy. Thank you for that interview and all that you bring to my ears. Courage from a fellow Postacogluite, Jackson.
Oh, Jackson, that is a beautiful... Big love to you and all Badgers who are listening. Raw, that letter makes me wonder, have you ever interviewed anyone, come across anyone in football, a player or a manager who said something to you that, like Jackson, you've incorporated it almost into your own philosophy, your own life?
Well, I think there's one who's defined my philosophy, and I say that as a man whose wedding was graced by the Champions League theme tune. So
Is that true?
Yeah, we left. We didn't come down the aisle. My wife didn't come down to the aisle to the Champions League theme tune, but we left as a married couple to the Champions League theme tune.
Because my God.
It's the
we
best
left
song.
to the Florida Cup theme tune at my wedding. Go on.
There was an Amazon program a couple of years ago called Married to the Game.
Yeah.
Which would follow the highs and lows of various footballers and their partners.
Including James Tarkowski.
Including the legendary James Tarkowski, whose wife seemed very nice. Anyway, Riyad Mahrez, the former Man City winner, now playing in Saudi Arabia, was one of the players. And his partner, who seemed lovely and bubbly and effervescent and smart and really driven, was a real contrast to Riyad, who did not seem like any of those things. And there was a point where she was complaining or expressing concern about the idea of moving to Saudi Arabia because she was happy. She's from Manchester. I think she's called Taylor. She's from Manchester. She had all of her friends around her. She didn't really want to move to Saudi Arabia. It all came as a bit of a kind of bolt from the blue. And she was having this conversation with Mahrez, sitting around the breakfast table, pouring her heart out in a really kind of articulate and very kind of honest way. And Mahrez was completely unfazed. And at the end, when she said, "Look, I'm just not sure I want to move to Saudi Arabia. I don't know if this is the best thing for me or for us or our family," Mahrez just shrugged and went, "It's part of the game, innit?" And that was it. And ever since then, my wife and I refer to any kind of difficult decision that we have to make around, picking the kids up or me travelling for work or her travelling for work. There comes a point in every conversation where one of us just shrugs and goes, "Part of the game, innit?"
So inspiring in the most insane way. Gotta say, I too, Jackson Badger, loved a lot of what Klopp had to say. I love what Big Ange has said about what football's about, memory making, the way it makes you feel. When Big Ange said something like, we sometimes lose sight of what sport's about. He said he understands it as not about winning or losing, it's about the connections to people, to cities, to countries, parents to their children. I believe that absolutely, which is, I think, why I'm rooting for that man so big time. As a Bill Men in Blazers, I think a lot about the Brighton CEO, Paul Barber, came on and talked about how he tells his team they're going on a journey. And I do think about that a lot too. But the one I truly live by actually came from Steve Kerr when we filmed with him. who's a man who I do think speaks so many life truths. He talked about how at the end of his career as playing for the San Antonio Spurs, getting very few minutes down the stretch. He was like 34, 35. And he asked his coach, the similarly iconic Greg Popovich, finally when he gave him a new contract, he said, "Greg, why are you giving me a new contract again? You never play me." And Pop just turned around and looked at him and said, "Life's too short to spend it around dickheads." And I love that. And I live by that because it is true. Life is short. How you spend it is your choice. It's much too short to spend it around dickheads. This is the moment when Rory decides never to do the podcast again.
I think that is genuinely very wise.
It's true. I need to put that on a mug. Life is too short to spend it around dickheads. Raw, thank you for spending it with me. That's it for today. Go and check out our interview from last week that I love with Bill Foley, owner of Bournemouth. Incredible man on our Running the Game, our Behind the Game series. What a life truth dispenser he is. It's a great one-on-one also with Bournemouth manager Andoni Iraola up there too. Subscribe to our newsletter via our website for more so you miss nothing of our crap. Raw, there is nothing crap about you. Take our thanks. Huge love to you, you Crown Prince of Harrogate.
It's been a pleasure.
Raw, this is Rog, sending you all big, big love. Let's not take a second of watching football together for granted. And courage.